Ladies and gentlemen, we are now live.
Thank you. Good evening, Silverton. Welcome to a special meeting of the Silverton Board of Trustees. It is June 17th and the time is 7:01 p.m. And I call this meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Trustee Barella. I know she's there. She's probably busy at the moment. Trustee Harper. Trustee Weggert.
Here.
Trustee Bierma.
Here.
Trustee George. Mayor Pro Tem Barney. Here. Mayor Furman.
Here. And it looks like Trustee Burrell has unmuted herself. We want to confirm.
Trustee
No, I have no sound. I could not hear you until Nathan just texted me. No. What's happening?
We're doing roll call.
She's here.
Okay. No, I could not hear anything. Thank you. Yes, I am here.
All right. Before we begin tonight's special meeting, I would like to make an addition to the agenda tonight. I have Sheriff Conrad here, who was unable to speak at our regularly scheduled meeting. And he would like to have the opportunity to speak now on the enforcement of the Article 3, Section 8-340, line G, that states no person shall operate off-highway vehicles in the town of Silverton between the hours of 9 and 7 a.m. This verbiage was approved by the board to be printed on the OHV pamphlets during our regularly scheduled meeting on Monday, June 14th. Thereafter, Sheriff Conrad contacted me with additional information, and I've suspended the printing of the pamphlets until the sheriff's concerns have been heard by the board. What I'm asking for here is direction from you all on how to proceed with the printing of the pamphlets after you hear Sheriff Conrad's statement.
Got it. Trustees, any objections? Okay. Thank you, Administrator Kushberg. Sheriff Conrad, would you like to speak?
Sure. You push me in front of the agenda? Absolutely. So the issue with the curfew, if you will, or the quiet time that came up at the last meeting that I'd hoped to be able to speak on is an issue that to me is a very serious officer safety issue for the community officers here. It makes a lot of sense to, if we have noise complaints that we try and limit things early in the morning and late at night, but really practically it's not that big of a problem. That's not what we're getting complaints about. I don't know why this has resurfaced. I think that if I recall in the beginning, when this language was adopted, it was kind of cut and pasted from our snowmobile language and put into the OHV law. We talked about it immediately stating that that wasn't appropriate. Nobody wanted the curfew put in place for OHVs at that time, and it wasn't done. It has since popped back up somehow. I don't know why or where or how, but in all practicality, in all the hundreds or over 1,000 OHV citations we've written in all this time, we've never written one of those. We've never had a phone call for one of those. So it's kind of a impractical moot point that now adding this into the brochure creates a situation where officers are going to be woken up in the middle of the night and early in the morning. And this is not coming from a lazy factor of not wanting to do that. It's coming from an officer safety factor of, so we have no idea what an OHV parked in front of the GI, let's say, is doing there. They could be there at the bar, they could be there staying there. So our officer goes to bed at midnight and then they get woken up at 2 o'clock in the morning by someone who has now read this and has merit to call it in. That puts officers who are working very long, very hard summer shifts in very difficult positions being woken up again. And then the morning officer getting woken up at 6 o'clock every morning. And it's going to happen a lot. And it's something that I think is intolerable for the way our sheriff's office staff and scheduling is set up. It would take hiring, we're already down one full-time officer. It would take hiring that officer and 2 more and trying to go to 4 10s to be able to even try and pull that off. In the current situation, it's just not a safe avenue for the sheriff's office to travel. And I think it's kind of a moot point. It's not going to solve too much of an issue. It will just create a lot of havoc, create a dangerous situation for our officers. So I would implore you, as I have before, to take that language out of the pamphlet, and make sure that we don't start receiving those phone calls. Now, I did have Trustee Barney in my vehicle today for a ride along, which I very much appreciate. It was really nice to have someone who's making decisions in this building about how we interact with the public and what we're enforcing out there, to get a firsthand view of what we're doing out there. It was spectacular for me. And I hope
For me.
she will share
I highly
her
recommend it.
her
It's
views as well.
a great experience in a weird way.
That threw me off my train of thought. Yeah,
Sorry.
that's okay. It's on me. I lost it, but I would.
To just see
Oh,
that.
so one of the things that I know that the mayor and I had spoken about, and I didn't quite see the light and its potential, but the way Sally had presented it to me today, I do see some light in kind of an ethical suggestion, rather than printing this as a law and giving people the opportunity to call and wake officers up every morning and every night, to have some kind of general rules of thumb, acts of decency, if you will, or I forget how you worded it to me.
Well, I was thinking about the skier responsibility code,
Mhm.
like the idea that there's just sort of the way that you behave when you're participating in this activity.
So if we had, and I don't want to totally rewrite your whole brochure here, that's not necessary, but your thought didn't hit me initially, but the way you presented it, I think that it does. We could have the bullet points of the things that we're enforcing that they need to know, and then a separate section that says, please keep these things in mind and have some courtesy for the neighborhood, and don't be out driving in the middle of the night and that kind of thing. That works for me.
I think we should talk about the first item first, and then we can think about how to develop the kind of courtesy.
I had a couple of
Our components
minor
about as
things
well next.
in regards to the bullet points on the copy. And I'm not sure if I think I have the most common copy, but it didn't have anything about the curfew on this. So I'm not sure if I have the most recent copy, because we were worried that the copy with the curfew went to the printer, and the copy that I have doesn't have anything about a curfew on it. So I may not have the most recent, but the one I have a couple of minor corrections on, if you will hear them.
Clarification, it has not gone to the printer yet. We were able to stop it in time so we could hear what your thoughts were.
Spectacular.
And let me pull up my copy and I'll make some bullet points.
So if now's the appropriate time on this,
Before we go into details on what revisions we'd have, I just had, so for me, the question is more about a process and liability one, which I'm glad that actually Attorney Whitmore joined us. I guess my question is, if we have an ordinance that has a number of items on it, and then we don't print all of those items, is the town potentially liable for choosing not to tell people what the laws are,
we're
or?
already in those shoes, Mayor, as I've explained to you before.
Totally.
Yeah, there's many things that we enforce that we don't put out in a brochure. There's many things about the OHV. We enforce flashing lights. That's not in this pamphlet. I don't need to be in the pamphlet. It's not that big a deal, but we're already in those shoes. We're not doing anything differently there.
Well, so we had
We're not fixing a problem. We're only creating a problem by putting that verbiage in there, in my opinion.
and I totally understand the practical nature of it, but we had a conversation earlier in the year where we were discussing whether it was possible to adopt something and then stay the enforcement for a period of time so that we could avoid issues with it. And we were told that our insurance would potentially be problematic with that, because if we have a law and then we choose as a town, as a policy, not to enforce that law, and then there's a liability as a result of the non-enforcement, insurance may just say, sorry, we're not going to cover this liability because you should have been at least attempting to enforce the law. So I totally agree with
And
you.
we're not changing anything because we've been not
The
enforcing.
law is already on the books.
This has been in place. All we're doing is advertising it and creating an issue where there hasn't been an issue before.
Right, but it's possible that for many years we've been doing something wrong, just from a policy perspective, and that maybe this is an opportunity to correct all of it, to make sure that we're not doing anything wrong and we're following your best practice ideas.
I'll agree with that. For many years, we've been doing a lot wrong about this OHV policy. And we're months into it being ended now, and I think we should not add fire to those flames by creating something that's going to create a dangerous situation for our officers.
For sure. So I guess I'll just ask if she's still on. She's disappeared from the screen.
One moment.
But if Attorney Whitmore can provide any guidance on what the best way to handle, or is there even any issue between what the ordinance says and what's included in the marketing pamphlet.
So, sorry, everybody. I had trouble getting in on my computer, so I was in on my phone and then managed to get in on my computer. So, most jurisdictions only enforce ordinances based on complaints, or at least that's a very common kind of thing. And the only time you really run into trouble is if you enforce it against one person and someone else complains it's unequal enforcement because you haven't enforced consistently. In this case, you know, you do have a number of years where you probably have not enforced. Frankly, I have read the ordinance language on noise, and curfew. Honestly, I don't know how you would enforce the noise part of the ordinance. It's a very subjective standard as opposed to a decibel standard, and so inherently it's difficult to enforce. But I think what the sheriff is suggesting is that I think the sheriff's suggesting the same thing. It's a very difficult thing to enforce. I think what the sheriff, if I've understood the conversation correctly, the sheriff is suggesting that the pamphlet simply provide guidance as opposed to offering up legal advice, perhaps. Or maybe I haven't understood all of the sheriff's comments, but I don't think the town would be in jeopardy of liability for simply printing a pamphlet with suggested behavior as opposed to reciting the ordinance.
Fantastic, thank you. So knowing that, let's move to what you'd request to have changed in the pamphlet.
Yeah, well, again, the pamphlet that I have doesn't have the verbiage in regards to the overnight, absolutely. So there are a couple things on there I would touch on that are outside of that issue, but.
That is the latest pamphlet that was printed without any updates to it. The map is being updated as well.
Okay, so then I guess I'm coming from a point of a little lacking education about what we're trying to change, but if the verbiage on the other couple of issues is the same, I can address those. And what I would just ask that I see a copy of what's going to go to the printer before we pull the trigger on it so that we can all be on the same page and make sure that, hey, if we're going to include a suggested, as Miss Barney, I'm sorry, I call her Miss Barney from school, Trustee Barney represented, I'm all for that idea, but I think that wording would have to be, you know, pretty on point to get that point across, and for it to be in a different section. So you've got the bullets that are including, you know, you put the $75 fines in there, that's great, but that would be kind of in a different area on the pamphlet in my eyes to make it a bit more of a suggestion rather than another rule that somebody could call in about.
I made the only.
If the board would allow direction for me to work with Sheriff Conrad on the language of this, moving forward, as you have all said, if you all agree that we can just work on this language and make it so that it's more of a suggestion and like the skier responsibility code.
Is there also someone from maybe the OHV working group that can be involved as well? So there isn't a perception that we're now excluding some other group?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Say Nate.
The only thing that is changing, other than a few small suggestions on the map itself, the language was to include no person shall operate an off-highway vehicle in the town between the hours of 9 p.m. and 7 a.m. That was the only change being made from the copy that you have.
Great. So then we're going to strike that sentence altogether and place some more appropriate verbiage in a different spot in the brochure that acts as a suggestion to that. to that, having, what's the word I'm looking for? I've lost my train of thought.
Well, we're fortunate to have a PR expert here.
Great.
So one of the questions I had, and one of the ideas that we were discussing was kind of like the leave no trace or stay the trail.
Yes.
Marketing programs. Is there something like that for like a code of operation for OHVs?
Considerations is the word.
I think it's an excellent idea, Mayor Furman. And we can work with Stay the Trail organization, and they partnered with the town of Silverton last year. And they have the billboard down, I think, down by the ponds that we can bring out, but they have a like an agreement, right, to be considerate of where you're recreating. I've been watching them, and they're working closely with Taylor Park. And even they'll bring staff and kiosks and work closely with us. So I think instead of recreating the wheel, if I can introduce that gentleman to Administrator Gloria, then we can work with them. But I think that's a good idea. I think it's like code of conduct. And if we start putting that,
And I think that's.
yes, and our expectations as a community, that is a wonderful tactic for us to take. And I think honestly, we should be taking that tactic.
So Gloria, with it, it sounds like there's a little bit of, there's the language massaging to do and the formatting so that it's visually separate from the other bullet points that are being enforced by the sheriff.
I see wheels turning over here. What are you thinking, Nate?
If we made too many revisions, Jean Taco has been amazing in
Yeah.
helping create this. I asked her for 2 changes. She had those done within the day for me. If we create too many changes to format from what you see there, I don't believe that we'll be able to have them printed in time for the holiday. I am open, as we all are, to suggestions.
May I make a suggestion? So outside of the brochure, why don't we just create a town campaign? Honestly, that could be flyers in business windows, social media campaign, and maybe not, I mean, let the brochure stand, but I think we need to create that expectation from the moment they get here. And we can do that in a number of ways.
That idea has a lot of merit because first of all, this brochure kind of has a short period of time for for it to get out for the 4th of July. And that would completely remove it from this list of rules and make it more of a code of ethics kind of situation. Be helpful.
And because we want everyone to see it, whether they take the map or not, like if we put it everywhere.
Molly is trying to raise her hand to speak.
And I was just about to ask if our trustees who are participating virtually would like to contribute.
Molly, do you have permission to speak if you'll just unmute? There you go.
Is it working finally? I'm sorry, I've been disconnected and reconnected 3 different times. So,
We can hear you.
so I'm sorry, I don't care. If that law is posted, I don't care if we word it right or word it wrong, whatever needs to happen, whether you think it's enforceable or not, just putting it out there stops it from happening. It might not stop it immediately, but it takes effect. So it's whether or not we can push the people into compliance or scare them into compliance rather than trying to do anything else. It might not be 100% enforceable. So I agree with what Marty said, but I didn't hear the rest of her comments because I got disconnected again. But there's no reason not to just post it, because by posting it, even if you're wording it as a strongly worded suggestion, just like our mask rule that tried to get enforced, we have pushed ourselves into a position that says, well, you knew about it. And by doing that, you're actually creating the fact that you're not going, well, you cannot plead ignorance to the law. So we need to, it doesn't matter how it's worded. I am 100% in agreement. It doesn't need to state the law, but try to focus on the fact that it is a law and it might not be enforceable from Bruce's standpoint, but it's the matter of fact that you're trying to make sure that people understand it exists. So by leaving it off the brochure, you're actually telling them it's okay to do it at midnight or 1 or 2 a.m., where when you put it on the brochure, you're actually telling them that it exists. And then you're going to scare people into compliance rather than having to actually enforce it.
I think that would be a great standpoint if it weren't made completely untrue by the fact that we've had lots of things on these brochures for the last 7 years that still continue to be broken every day. It's not going to fix the issue, and it's not that big of an issue in the first place. Again, we're not fixing anything here. We're only creating a problem for law enforcement and for the safety of our officers. That's why I'm adamant about it.
Trustee Birma or Trustee Wiegert, thoughts?
No new thoughts. I feel like we were on a pretty good idea train before. I think Bruce has made some good points. I don't have too much to add.
Thank you. Trustee Wiegert?
Yeah, I'm fine with our town administrator working with Sheriff Conrad and working on the language. And I think it's important to be considerate of what Nathan said about how we need to just monitor our changes, not create more problems. And yeah, I like the skier responsibility code, take that to OHVs. I think that's great. Kind of put that on them, let them know that there's a certain way to act, and it's about looking after each other. So yeah, fantastic thoughts.
Thank you. And I have to say that I made the same point that Trustee Barella just made, although slightly differently, in conversation with Sheriff Conrad. And I became convinced through that conversation that his concerns are truly valid, and that the concerns for having a good team of people that can enforce our laws that are healthy and rested and capable outweighs the possible benefit of including the language and creating the possibility of a lot of complaints that we haven't had to deal with previously. So I did start in the same place that Trustee Barella is coming from and see that as a valid point, but was convinced through conversations that your point is a stronger one.
Appreciate it.
So should I send everybody the pictures of the Wyman Hotel not informing their guests and Abby rolling up on them, or should I not? Because if you're not going to hold what's good for one place to the other, then we have a major issue.
I don't follow your comment, Trustee Barella.
Got it. Good. Understand.
Really? Should I forward those pictures?
We're not doing that.
I'm sorry?
I have pictures. I was driving to town hall the other day because
Pictures of
I had
what?
to, of Shane's people getting pulled over. They were walking their luggage into the Wyman, and Shane didn't inform his customers that they were not allowed to park on the side street of 12th, and Abby had to roll up on them and tell them they had to move their vehicles. So what's the difference between all of this? That's what I'm saying. If we try to just focus on the fact that these laws are enforceable. Well, I'll send everybody pictures. How's that? These laws are enforceable. These laws are enforceable. If you're parking off route, they're enforceable. That's why Abby rolled up on customers that were staying at the Wyman as I was driving to town hall.
I can't figure out what this has to do with the noise ordinance we're discussing, Trustee Barella.
Because I'm saying everything is relevant. So you're going to enforce a parking issue, but you're not going to enforce a noise issue.
Correct.
It doesn't matter if you enforce it 100% or not. It's the fact that it already exists as a law. It's already on our books. Whether or not you choose to enforce it, then make it a strongly worded advisory on because we have to stop this. We've got to stop the madness. We've got to stop people saying that it's okay for one hotelier to do it, but not another. We've got to stop the people saying that it's okay that if you're on Blair Street and you're in a VRBO, that you can just ride around. So by publishing it, you're actually making it a strongly worded advisory. Then you're actually informing the public that this law exists. You don't need to necessarily call out the fines.
I feel like you're implying that the sheriff's office is enforcing things differently for different businesses or different parts of town. I can assure you that's not correct.
Yeah, and trustee Bell,
I didn't say
object
that
to your
at all.
statements. You
I
said that
didn't say that
exactly,
at
and you are
all.
entirely out of line.
I am saying,
Could you
no,
take a
I'm not
breath?
out of line.
You were very out of line,
Could
trustee
you?
Bell.
Could you? It was your
Trustee
hotel
Burrow.
that I rolled up on when they were doing it. But I'm saying, if you put it on the brochure, then everybody will know exactly what the laws are and what is expected of individuals.
I'd like the record to reflect that trustee Barella tried to make accusations relating to certain trustee
Oh, I'll
businesses, and
forward
that's
the
completely
pictures.
inappropriate. I see no relevance to trustee Barella's comments relating to any of the businesses in town.
Just for
Really? Because
clarif-
I saw an example of that today, just saying.
An example of what is totally unclear, it sounds like you accuse the sheriff of selectively enforcing laws as it relates to different trustees, and that's entirely inappropriate.
Unfortunately, Molly has lost service again. I'll bring her back as soon as she calls back in.
Sure.
Just to be clear, I am just looking for direction on the pamphlets again.
Thank you.
Pamphlets.
And I support that direction.
As do I. And it sounded like trustee Bierma and trustee Uyghur did as well.
And we understand that efficiency is key.
Thank you.
I do. I don't want to speak for everyone.
All right. So the board is providing direction to please go ahead and work with Sheriff Conrad to ensure that he approves of the wording that's included in the pamphlet. And there was a request also to include someone representing the OHV community to also sign off on the final wording of the pamphlet. And hopefully we can have that finalized tomorrow in time for printing so that we can hit our deadlines to have the pamphlets delivered before the July 4th holiday weekend.
Thank you.
All right. Now moving on to, is there any other comment on this topic?
There was just a couple of small tweaks to the verbiage I have in front of me that if is the same on this latest pamphlet, I think is worthy of a quick discussion. They're pretty minor and I think we'll go pretty quick, but in your second bullet point where you have driving without a valid driver's license or proof of insurance will result in a $75 fine. I think that should either read with you or on your person, because if you have a valid driver's license, but it's not with you, that doesn't matter. And we don't write people for that. We run people and learn that they have a valid driver's license. We don't write them for that if they don't have it with them, but they don't have their insurance with them. We have no option but to write them. So they can have valid insurance and have it back in their truck, and that doesn't do us any good. So if we could add with you or on your person to that would make a lot of sense.
So the phrase with you or on your.
On your person, correct. And then on your fourth bullet point, sorry, mine's printed so small, I have to.
So we're talking about just giving you the.
Yeah.
Okay, the whole thing? Great, we'll figure it out.
Yep.
Okay, I just didn't know if you wanted to,
No, I
'cause
think-
there's nothing major that you guys are gonna have to stress out about. It's just
Yeah, if you
small
wanna
verbiage.
work on that.
Thank you, sorry, I wasted time.
No, not
Oh, no, all good.
Yeah, good.
And then before we begin the discussion of the drafted ordinance 2021-06 for the stage 1 municipal fire ban, we need a motion to rescind two ordinances, 20-20 or 2020-05 and 2020-07. These are fire bans from last year.
Understood. Would the trustee like to make that motion? Rescinding our former fire bans that have not yet been rescinded?
I'll make that motion to rescind the 2020-05 and the 2020-07 ordinances.
Do you have a second?
Sure, I can second.
Thank you very much. Clerk Freeze, roll call, please.
Trustee Burrow? Trustee Trustee Weigert?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Trustee Bierma?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Barney?
Yes.
Mayor Furman?
Yes.
And then you all have the new ordinance 2021-06 for a stage 1 municipal fire ban. That was emailed in your packet. It's not printed out, but it was emailed earlier. And I think we have Jim Donovan here. If you have any questions regarding that, as well as a possible exemption in there as well. Jim, did you want to speak to this ordinance?
Sure. Thanks for having myself and Deanne, PIO, and Sheriff Conrad as fire marshal. Just so everyone knows on the record that currently there are stage 1 fire bans pretty much the entire western slope, and the fire danger for our area is at very high, and La Plata County, it's at extreme. There was a fire yesterday that started in La Plata County. They've been able to get it under control. There have been several fire starts around the western slope, so there's really no question that that we should go into a fire ban for Silverton. Any questions on that?
I know that the county only went into stage 1, but is there any reason to only consider stage 1? Should we be considering something more significant?
They always just will always try to do it in coordination with all of the agencies. So Forest Service that's definitely in the books, but right now it's still stage 1 conditions. But stage 2 is really much more severe in the restrictions. So stage 2, it has to be really, really bad. It's bad, not really, really bad yet.
And I think that consistency in messaging is what's really important there. You know, we've got 2 federal agencies, the county and the town. And so when you drive through those 4 different jurisdictions and you see a fire over there, but over here you can't have one, it's really, really confusing. So it's really important for us to all be on the same page.
Great. Yeah, so the only exception that I just wanted to entertain for the board, and this would be different from the county. The county and the Forest Service are really very, very similar. But just if the town would want to consider for improved fire pits, that's basically a built structure to hold a fire or a fire pan. That is what you see in National Park campground or a Forest Service campground. The county is not allowing those, but I think within town, it is something to consider. People do, if they have that built in their yard, I think it's appropriate. It's really as much up to the sheriff on the enforcement issues. The city of Uray is allowing that. That would just be the one exception.
The grate.
With the grate, yes.
Grate over the top.
Right.
Yeah.
Having a fire mesh grate, I think, is an important aspect to that. And then we're okay with it being downtown. The issue that I think is important on this, just to understand for the broader spectrum, is this: we have a rising tide of these open propane fire pits. And everybody brings them. They're a dime a dozen now, so everybody has them. And so when we go into fire bans, people think that those are okay, and they're not for many reasons. I've seen kids catch the woods on fire with marshmallow sticks. I've seen drunks catch their robes on fire for standing too close to it. But more importantly, from the camp next door or from a camp a mile away, it looks like a campfire and it advertises that campfires are okay. So those things we really need to crack down on. The feds got on board with that last year and realized that this is really kind of the beginning of an exponential growth of that product. And they've been really helpful in trying to shut that down. And the county verbiage, I think, really well includes that. So if we get to that point in stage 2 in town, I just would implore you to keep that in mind. The county lists as level A or section A on their prohibition. It states building, maintaining, attending, or using a fire, campfire, coal or wood burning stove, any type of charcoal fueled boiler, or propane fire ring or open fire of any type. I think that's a really great way to word it, because we have lots of people who say that, yeah, I know campfires are illegal, but this has a shut off valve. They think it's okay, and it's just not.
I remember this from last year, and we were so new, I didn't know, but I think I recall charcoal grills being an issue, charcoal grills in town. So obviously in the county and on Forest Service or BLM camping situations, it not being allowed, but there is an issue of in-town charcoal grills because of the access to the emergency services through the fire department. So I don't see charcoal grill on here. Oh yeah, I do. Charcoal fuel broiler. I just wonder if we can clarify, or I don't know what. I just wanted to raise the issue. Recall it as a confusion last year.
Yeah, I think in town is a very different story. Typically, if you knock, the danger of a charcoal grill is that if you knock it over, it's a pretty hard thing to clean up if you don't have water handy and you're out in the backcountry. Whereas here at a house, hey, you have your house to worry about catching on fire. You're going to be on it and you're going to have a hose and you're going to have water nearby. So I'm not as concerned with that in town.
Okay.
Do you agree?
I agree. I think
Is that clear? Do people understand that?
I think part of that is we'll just have to communicate, especially if you all decide to allow the basically improved fire pit, just that difference, because it is, it's town limits. It's hard to say, but within town, we have very good defensible wildland fire space. You get out in the county,
Right.
all bets are off.
Right.
But we just have to be very clear with visitors. That's the purpose, and residents as well, because there's a lot of residents who have just a pit dug in their yard, and that's not good because the fire can smolder in that. So I'm fine with charcoal in town.
And I tell you, I'm on the fence about the whole in town, even improved fire pits, because again, it's that messaging. It's if you drive through town to go to a campsite out there and you see 3 fires, you're going to go light a fire out there.
Yep.
So there is, it is the flip side to that is property rights. I have a house in town. I love to have a fire pit in my backyard, and who's going to tell me not to do that? If it's a good, safe situation. So I'm really kind of torn about the issue. I think it's got pros and cons on both sides, and I'm happy to go either way in town. But I think that requires good marketing, that fire is allowed in town in an appropriate way, and it's certainly not allowed outside of town.
And then stage 2, it would
shut down.
go away. Yeah.
So my thought is that it's pretty confusing to have these at all. And that if we expect to be trending towards stage 2, which I think we are, we saw these great clouds all day and didn't end up with a major rainstorm, that we would save ourselves a lot of headache. I mean, I love a fire in the backyard as much as anybody else, but we'd probably save ourselves a lot of headaches just by going straight to being like, let's be the best possible ambassadors of these mountains we can be and reduce the risk wherever possible. I don't think we ruin anybody's time more than we already are by saying if you're camping, you can't have an open flame.
Never told a kid he can't have s'mores.
I have. You'll survive.
I think my personal feeling is that it'd be easier to just be clear cut, especially because this might be very short lived at stage 1.
Yeah.
Not going to hear an argument from me.
Yeah, I'm totally fine with it. I mean, honestly, it gets more into an enforcement issue if you see it here and then 50 feet out, Bruce has to.
And we can just have, on the signs coming into town, just no fire.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It would make communications more streamlined, and then I could work with Nathan. So we're not saying, but at this line, you can't do this, but on this line, you can. So then he could lean more on county communications.
Trustee Birma or Trustee Wiegert, any thoughts?
No, I think you guys did a good job covering it all and going through all the kinks. And I think, having a nice unified message like that, especially the way we're trending, sounds good to me.
So then, is there a motion to accept it as it is written?
With some formatting updates, yeah.
Okay, with some formatting updates.
Would someone like to make that motion?
I can make the motion to accept resolution.
Ordinance.
Oh, I'm looking at the wrong thing. Is it ordinance 2021-04?
06.
Sorry, guys. I'm on the wrong email. I shouldn't be making this motion. I will make the motion to approve ordinance 2021-06.
Do we have a second?
Sure, I'll second it again.
Thank you. Clerk, please roll call, please.
Trustee Weigert,
Yes.
Trustee Bierma,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Barney,
Yes.
Mayor Furman.
Yes. Is there anything else you need from us with respect to this ordinance?
Nope.
Okay. Well, thank you everyone for coming together on short notice on this evening. I believe we've come to the end of our agenda, so I adjourn the meeting. Sorry, 1 second, clerk, please.
I just wanted to let you guys know tomorrow, since we have a new federal holiday that has been passed, Town Hall will shut down at noon tomorrow in observance of the new Juneteenth holiday.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Already.
At this point, we will now adjourn this meeting. Thank you very much.